things. What I want to get to, though, is this. So I was in the industry and kind of thinking, like, well, why are we making these games again? It seems like we're making them to hook people. Maybe that's a bad thing. And nobody seemed to really be talking about that, except for Lowe, who's lurking around. He said some really, really smart things.
The rules of a game, right, the kinds of interactions that a game puts you into, is the meaning of life for that game. And the meaning of life in chat is kind of like, well, you're some schmo who doesn't really have anything better to do than sit around pushing a button, right, and killing imaginary monsters that are meaningless, right? It also says it doesn't really matter if you're smart or are adept at trying to get ahead in a system, because what really matters is how much time you sink in, because there's all these artificial constraints on you. It also says that you don't really need to do anything exceptional, because to feel good, to be rewarded, all you need to do is run the treadmill like everyone else.
I 100% recommend Googling Design Reboot, and it'll come up for free, and give it a listen. I kind of did it a disservice by sort of fixating on a criticism of things like World of Warcraft, which I don't actually know anything about too much, but he was just talking about how if you're making something that you know is kind of not worth people's time, like, you know, moment to moment, then what you're doing is maybe kind of unethical or something. And it's just, it's something that stuck in my mind. You know, when you work in the industry, you do have your doubts about what you're doing, and anyway, that's what that was. Thankfully, I had an alternative, because in Toronto, we don't have much of an industry, but we do have a pretty rad indie video game community. And so as I was sort of looking for a place to jump, you know, I started making wonderful friends. And one of the pioneers in Toronto, the people who made N, that's MetaNet, Marion Reagan, John Mack made Everyday Shooter, phenomenal game. Jim Monroe's one of the dudes behind the scenes in general, also a text adventure creator and author. And Jim McGinley makes Toe Jam, which is a huge video game jam. And then there's all kinds of wonderful folks like Ben Rivers and Miguel Sternberg and Michael Todd, tons of folks. And I jumped in on a game jam, and I made this zombie game. It was the first time I got the pixels going, and I was doing it with this guy Michael Todd, and it worked out great. And then I tried my hand at making this mountain climbing game. Anyway, I started getting back into the pixels, started thinking, yeah, maybe this will work. But like, what did I actually have in mind? How was I going to make a connection? There was just no way that I was going to find like the exact right collaborator, like somebody who was in town, somebody who was interested in working with me, somebody with like, you know, the experience, somebody who knew Jim and appreciated Jim. I mean, that person, those people don't exist. Like, it would be impossible to find those people. So I bumped into these guys, and this is Chris on the right with the beard. He's the creative director at Cappy. On the left is Nathan Valley. He's the president at Cappy. Cappy's like 20 people, studio in Toronto. But actually, I ran into them hammered at GDC at One Up. Robert Ashley had snuck me in. And within 5 minutes of having met them, they knew my work, which was crazy. I knew that they were making great games. Within 5 minutes, Nathan said, "We will make a game." And when we sobered up, he still wanted to make a game, so that was cool. Definitely a big moment. This is Cappy. Oh, sorry, I shouldn't have cut that off. This is Wicked Game Critter Crunch. This is Might of Magic. That's them again, because they're hilarious. So this is us. We're making a game together, Superbrothers and Cappy. Let's do it. Let's bring Jim on for sure. And let's call it Poop Sock, right? Yeah. No? Okay. I wanted to call it Poop Sock because I thought it'd be all about like pressing a button and getting gold and like killing monsters and getting gold, and it would be this kind of like John Blow design reboot the game sort of thing, and it would just be kind of foolish, but you know, fun or whatever. And it would be called Poop Sock. Yeah, it would be great. It'd be awesome. And you know, and then they were like, Poop Sock, huh? You know, we have to submit a grant, and that name might not work. And also, that doesn't sound like a lot of fun. So I was like, yeah, you're right. So I sat down with Chris, and we came up with Sword and Sworcery, which is like, it started with a logo. We had like Sword and Sworcery, and then we're like, hey, let's put an extra W in, that'd be dumb. And then we put it in, and we're like, all right, and then that was it. But we didn't actually know what it was, and so it took a while for me to figure out. So Sword and Sworcery, World of Warcraft's part of it, Legend of Zelda is part of Sword and Sworcery, Adventure, Dungeons and Dragons, Conan the Barbarian. Now you're getting back in the day. That's where the term Sword and Sworcery comes from. It was coined in the 50s to describe specifically what Robert E. Howard was doing. Robert E. Howard is a Texan who created Conan back in 29 or 31 or something. He was writing all these pulp fiction novels. This is as far back as that stuff goes. It's kind of the granddaddy of all this. Well, I mean, not all of it, but a huge portion of all this, like, you know, dudes with big swords chopping up snakes and stuff. It was pretty fascinating. Like, I hadn't actually like looked that deep into it, and it was just really interesting to me. That's Robert E. Howard. That's the guy who created this. He's dressed as an Indian, and he's like 9 years old. That's hilarious. But what's weird is, okay, so he got really rich, but he still lived at home. And his mom, when his mom died, and he was 30, he shot himself in the head. So not a normal man, I guess, in some ways. And I got thinking about the psychology of that. Who's like this dude who's living in his mom's basement in like 1930s Texas with like a lot of money, who will prove to be suicidal. He writes the Conan stories standing up, yelling and typing, apparently, according to legend. And when you read the books, it's like, that's what it sounds like. It sounds like he's just like bellowing it all, and it's like, it's kind of interesting. So I was thinking about the psychology of it, and this is Carl Jung. And if you dig into Carl Jung, this is kind of a sidetrack, but check it out. He wrote this crazy book called The Red Book, and it's all like dudes with swords and dragons. I was like, what is it? Like, we're all infatuated with this. This is all like low culture stuff, but like, we just want to get a magic sword and go down like to a dark cave, and we just want to fight a snake. We've been wanting to do this for years and years. So I thought, hey, that'd be a cool mix. Let's get Conan the Barbarian type stuff, and like a little bit of like kind of meta Carl Jung, and maybe make a game with that. So here's the team. It's pretty much 5 of us. That's me. That's Chris. He was like supervising design, shepherding it along, and now he's basically like on it, driving it, because he's actually finished games and I haven't. This is Jim. He's hovering and throwing magical stuff our way. This is John Maurer. He's the lead coder on the project. He's also the guy who introduced me to pixel art in '02, but that's like a weird coincidence. He's an awesome guy. And then Frankie is another coder on the project who's doing a lot of the heavy lifting, and they're totally awesome folks. Anyway, I got going. All right, let's get some sketches. Dudes with, I don't know, like in forests and stuff. And I made this one back in the day, and I was like, there's no way I could paint a game that looks like that. It would take forever. I'm not going to do it. And then it turns out it does take forever. It's true. I made that. I started doing these things where it's like, how would it feel in the iPhone? Because the iPad didn't exist, and I was just doing all this kind of stuff. And then I was like, I got this whole concept of input-output cinema, which is another stupid made-up term. But I have this kind of feeling that if we can just make things that aren't so much about the mechanics, it's not just about like getting to the end and winning or pressing a series of buttons, we can start to make things more like reliant on being interesting. Anyway, I think that's something I'm interested in, and so I created this bullshit word to make it sound cool. Input-output cinema being just like a conversation that you have. Like the creator makes this thing, you poke and prod, and there's meanings that get created out of it. And there might be some mechanics, there might be like adventuring and battling, but it doesn't have to be. And I think we're seeing a lot of that. I think that a lot of what's going on in the indie crowd, it's near to a music video in a lot of ways. Anyway, I started doing these little sketches. Hello, sir, I've got a problem. Tell me what your problem. I've got this dream where I wake up and I'm chopping wood, and then I go for a walk. And anyway, I was just trying to figure stuff out. It's pretty weird. So here I am, like this is back in like September, I guess, or October. So the coders were just getting ready. There was no pixels on the screen yet, and I was just trying to like get animatics together so that when they were ready to go, we would have a direction to go in. Oh, the other crazy constraint at this point was we were going to submit to the IGF, which is a wonderful, great festival, a great place to get recognition. But like from the day that we got the first pixel on the screen to the deadline was 30 days, and so we made some stuff up and submitted it, and it was a crazy time. I don't actually have footage of that, so you'll have to imagine how radical it was. But it did get us an achievement in art award, even though it was just the like barest minimum you could possibly imagine. Anyway, these are more just me trying to work out what the vibe of this new one's going to be. Weird stuff. The character ended up being female, just because it seems cooler. You probably don't know she's female, but she is. I checked. After we submitted the IGF thing, I was like, okay, it's actually really hard for me to make systems work because I'm not a proven game designer by any stretch of the imagination. But one thing I can do is I can paint a whole bunch of stuff. And I started getting this thought, like it was like, over Christmas or whatever. And I was just playing around with the image on the iPhone and just thinking like, just the way that the image viewer works seems like a really great way to operate, a really great way to explore a space and interact with things. And we had kind of vague ideas before about how it was going to work, but it kind of started to crystallize. And I started just doing all these sketches and stuff like this. This was me figuring out like, oh, what does it look like when you like touch the screen, and how do we kind of handle that? Just kind of trying to figure things out. And then this was a Christmas card that was sent out back in the day. This was the first appearance of the razor sharp moon. And our next deadline was the Hand-Eye Society. So in Toronto, all this great stuff going on. One of the great things is there's this coming together, this thing called the Hand-Eye Society, and there's these socials that happen every 2 months. And anyway, we said we'd show something. This was like back in January. So then it's like, okay, what are we going to show? So I figured out this animatic to one of Jim's songs that I loved very, very dearly. And yeah, so this is me in like Premiere with a bunch of art, and it's not animated, it's going to look retarded. But this took like a couple days to make. And it's set us in a direction for a couple months in the early part of this year. If you've seen the clip online, you know that this is that. The crap version of it. That's me trying to get across how it's going to work. It's pretty brutal. That's what that was, and then we had to actually go and figure out how to make that. It wasn't, I guess, the hardest thing. Here's a flyer for the Hand-Eye Society back in the day with the deer. That was cool. And then the actual Hand-Eye Society event, it was Cappy and me, and they presented a wicked game called Heartbeat, which is still happening. And this is what it looks like at the Hand-Eye. It's jam-packed and really sweaty, even if it's the winter. But it's pretty awesome. A really, really good vibe. And then I guess this is probably what we presented to them, which is the same little animatic that you saw, but in game format. And the audio. Again, if you've seen this thing online, you know this pretty well. One thing that got cut is I wanted to do like a 3D thing. Yeah, it's not easy to do. We did try it. We did get it in, but we didn't stick to it. Yeah, so then GDC rolled around. That's in like March. So we'd already heard we got the Achievement in Art Award, which was crazy and awesome. So we were going, and we were gonna have a booth, and but we didn't actually have like a combat thing. So I was like, oh, we need like a naked dancing bear to just really spike this whole composition. So that guy showed up for work, and then we got the IGF award, which is great, or the IGF mobile thing. and you know, we worked hard on it. This is the clip that's online, you know, we've seen that a million times now. And then, yeah, this is the thing that we kind of added for GDC, where it's like, let's get the combat going. And this is back in the day. Stuff like that. So we got a great response from GDC, crazy great. Jim and my girlfriend Jory and I were at the booth, and everybody was checking it out, and you know, we thought we had something kind of cool, but it was really kind of unnerving and awesome to see people digging it. Yeah, so we got the award. We got Boing Boing giving us thumbs up. The Pocket Gamer going kind of crazy here. Forget PlayStation Move and all the developer panels. What everyone was really talking about was Superbrothers. Yeah, whatever. No. I mean, but like, thanks. That's ridiculous. Amazing piece of work. But we also got a whole bunch of really funny responses that I collected on the site. But here's my favorite one. Just to prove the graphical haters wrong, it won the IGF Award for Achievement in Art. This proves that the IGF jury are a bunch of tree-smoking hippies out of touch with the real entertainment world. No, it proves you wouldn't know art if it came up to you dressed like the Mona Lisa with the name tag reading, "Hello, my name is Art," and introduced itself as Artie Artington. There's also somebody that said, "Is it weird that I read the headline as Sword and Grocery?" Okay. Another amazing thing is this guy Clay Morrow, who I never knew, but he sent an email. He was playing with Legos with his kids, and he sent in this statue made of Legos of the character. It was badass. And then when also at GDC, I did this thing. I was asked to do a 5-minute rant because you get a free pass out of it. And even though I never made a game, I came up with this this thing that was basically just like, I think that if you minimize the amount of dialogue and like you know, sort of straightforward cinematic storytelling, or the, you know, one-to-one storytelling, you can create this kind of magic in a game that I think older games had by default. And I was just arguing kind of for using the language of video games and sort of avoiding a bunch of other clutter. And then that got picked up by Mr. Brandon at Boing Boing, which is great. But the effect of all this was that it's like, okay, it's the first game, got great response at GDC. People read the thing online. I kind of felt like I'd climbed the high dive board and then said, "Hey everybody, look at me, I'm gonna jump off the high dive board." And then it's like, I've never dove off a high dive board before. This is gonna end in tears. And it was kind of like worrying. You get back and you're like, okay, that was great. What do we do now? So I dug into it, and this is where the mythology stuff comes in. I started dreaming of like, okay, if Conan is from Cimmeria is like, you know, in between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, then I wanted this game to be taking place like right next door in Scythia. We can check a map. It's Scythians, by the way, actually had women warriors. You think of the Amazon, you know, that name kind of gets thrown around, but like there actually were. These women riding around on horses with big old bows, and there's actually tombs around about. Like there's a certain amount of this history that, like, it's totally fascinating. It's totally legit. Robert E. Howard was very aware of it. Like, he kind of fictionalized it and shaped it, but he knew that area, like at least in theory. The Hyborian Age, where Conan takes place, is actually just a distortion of the Hyperborean like place, which is basically above the north wind from where the Greeks were. It's a fascinating place, and because they didn't have literature or literacy, nobody knows too much about them. So there's Scythia, and there's Cimmeria, and there's the rest of the ancient world. Anyway, I find this stuff fascinating. Here's me painting the world, kind of sketching it out. This big mountain. It's called Mingi Ta. That's an actual mountain. It means eternal mountain in Old Turkish, and it's the tallest mountain in all of Europe. This is a Frazetta piece that came up when Frazetta passed. I wasn't a gigantic Frazetta guy, but just getting into this whole project, I started to realize just how awesome that dude is, and how much he, just like Robert E. Howard, has shaped a lot of this kind of genre. It's pretty phenomenal what he did. This is just me ripping off one of his pieces, but then I put a quote under it about how much he hates people who rip him off, and I thought that was funny. This is the cast for the game. There's the Scythian. That's the hero. There's Jim Guthrie. You find him in different places in the game. One place he's just like hanging out playing a little song. But if you play the game during the dark moon, like when the 3 days when the moon is not visible in the actual sky, like the for real sky, he's playing a crazy, grimy Twin Peaks concert type thing out in the woods somewhere. Which look forward to trying to find that. This is our psychiatrist. This is a wolf. This is the grizzled boar. That's his name. This is a girl called Agatha, and this is Logfella, who's a woodsman because he likes logs, and I got Robert Ashley to provide a little bit of voice. Check it out. Robert Ashley does A Life Well Wasted.
Sure. What do you think about blood sports? Everyone likes blood sports, right? Yeah, I heard. I heard that they're building a place downtown. Some kind of place to see people get killed by animals, beasts, and stuff. That sounds neat. I was reading the paper last week that a giant, literally a giant, like a 9-foot man, huge guy, torn apart at one of these things by a lion, and the lion actually ate parts of him.
Anyway, that's my whole thought is like I don't want to rely on voice acting for this thing, but if you're in a game that totally doesn't have voice acting and then somebody starts talking to you, that'd just be kind of weird. So sorry for spoiling the surprise, but and then the final character is just this horrible, evil monster thing that let's just not even talk about. Anyway, it's up on the mountain and it scares the crap out of me. The iPad came out when we were making this thing. That was exciting. The only thing was, the game in theory you can scale the whole thing up, right? Because it's pixels, they got sharp edges. But when you do scale it up, you kind of want to make it even prettier, and then it just takes that much longer. But it's starting to look fancy on it. I think it's working out. The whole concept of this thing is that it's an EP. It's like a vinyl record with two sides, side A, side B. You can choose whichever one you want from the start. Side A is kind of the more straightforward thing, and then side B is the kind of more mysterious moon logic thing. There's a bunch of items. They're crazy. Mushrooms, space babies, flowers, a book called the Megatome, and a key. A word about the Megatome. So remember I showed you that thing about Carl Jung, and he wrote that crazy red book? Well, we wanted to make one of those. So there's a book in the game that you get, and when you open it up, it's kind of like a log of all the things people have said to you, and you can kind of browse it like Twitter. And this stuff doesn't matter for like the whole first part of the game. First part of the game just cruise around, no problem. But if you want to start digging in and solving mysteries, you got to start figuring this stuff out and listening to people's clues and things like this. So that's the Megatome. Anyway, so that was all fun. We made all those designs, and then it's like, great, okay, so I guess now we have to make it actually actually make the whole goddamn thing, and that was a sobering realization because I was the guy that had to basically make a lot of that stuff. So I took a little break, and actually it took a little break. Sort of in May, we had wonderful guests coming out to Hand-Eye Society, like Mr. Messoff and Mr. Brandon, and then I went to France anyway, and then yeah, came back in the summer, and it's just been work for a long time, a lot of hours, a lot of pixels, and making a game, man. Making a game it's not easy. It takes hours and hours, and there's a lot of skills, and there are skills that a lot of people have earned, and I haven't earned them. So I'm still earning those skills, and I got a lot of respect for people who've actually proven themselves. This is kind of the place I'm operating in when I'm painting. It's a program called ProMotion. You kind of see the palette down on one side. Then I'm opening up a level editor and connecting all the dots, and then I'm figuring out how to hack my John and Frankie's XML, and then I'm adding fancy stuff in the game, and then more of that. Like this scene right here, like it doesn't look that crazy, but it's like many different revisions at this point. I've painted this room like 5 times as the project changes shape. there's a double rainbow, just in case you're wondering. The last thing that's kind of gone in the last little while, I mean, a lot, like the whole game is basically in existence. We just have successive waves of polish left to do. But the last thing was this thing that Chris wanted to do, where you fight triangles, because that just makes sense in a pixel game. So we're cooking on this right now, but it's just going to be this really weird thing. It's kind of later in the game. It's the kind of thing that you it's one of these things you discover. So I'm not going to go too far into it. But it's going to be weird. This whole game is going to be really weird. Hopefully in a really good way. We'll see. And yeah, like I said, there's a whole moon logic. So when you get deeper into it, you've got to be paying attention to the moon. And when you get way deep into it, you got to know when the equinox is, because that's for real. Here's how the graphics are starting to turn out in this place. And we can just go and sort of end on a song. I'll just cruise through to that little bit we were watching on the way up, and we can kind of see what's happening there. Oh, here's that Jim Guthrie weirdness concert. Words, no sense. I don't know if you guys have seen Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, but this is our twisted ass version of it. It's not quite done, but it's gonna be like demons dancing with deer and just horrible stuff. Anyway, so we saw this, we saw that, and then I feel like we can just kind of see what's happening here. If you want to give this thing a spin, I'll be at the Fantastic Arcade pretty much after this. Got 2 iPads. It's not a game you can really jump in and out of, but feel free. And if you want to keep in touch, I'll throw some contact info right about now. Whoa! What the? What? There you go. That's it. Thanks very much.
Another few months of language class, and then hopefully we'll put it out there.
At some point I should put headphones on.
Oh, actually, if you want to, let me just set up the next little sequence. There's a wicked little song that comes up.
Is the music original, or did you get like someone to do it?
Craig, I might be doing something really rude right now. I'm asking for approval for a totally obnoxious thing that I'm doing.
Have you heard of a guy called Robert Ashley? He's like he does like great radio show, sort of like NPR style. Anyway, he's an awesome dude, and he's in the kind of video game scene. Anyway,
Is he a Toronto based?
he was in San Francisco. He moved over to Georgia. He's in Athens. Anyway, he's provided a couple of little voice samples for this guy, Logfella. So even though there's no real voice in the game, just like walking around, listening to the birds and the bees, and then this guy starts talking.
Also, the music is it original, or you pull tracks from like?
Oh no, yeah, that's this guy Jim Guthrie, he was in a band called Royal City back in like 2000 to 2003.
Okay.
He's like, I don't know, he's considered sounds like Sufjan Stevens. He's got a bunch of solo records that are kind of on that wavelength, like folk, kind of pop, kind of catchy stuff. He was in a band called Islands for a while.
When you collaborate with him, does he put on the music after the graphics, or do you do it in like?
It's back and forth. When we were starting the project, he's like, here's a whole bunch of stuff I made that seems like to be on a similar wavelength, and then some of them I grab and I'm trying to build, like a style around the songs. But then there are also cases where it's like, I want to do this thing with a psychiatrist in like an empty space, and he's like, oh, I think I got it. Here's a song that you could use.
That's awesome. What a great process.